It's a critical time at the moment, and more than 50,000 Palestinians are reported to have been killed in Gaza since October 2023. And despite the brief and fragile ceasefire, Israeli operations have now resumed, and the humanitarian catastrophe has worsened dramatically. It is in this grave context that international diplomacy needs to be reasserted, not as an ideal, but as a necessity. And Macron has been in Cairo alongside President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and has made a vital intervention. He's lent his full support to the Arab-led plan for reconstruction in Gaza and the establishment of a new system, a new government under the Palestinian Authority. Macron has been unequivocal. Hamas must have no role in this governance and must no longer constitute a threat to Israel. This isn't a mere statement of intent, it's the scaffolding of a realistic political future. And Macron's call for a co-hosted international summit with Saudi Arabia to advance the two-state solution adds a long overdue multilateral summit, multilateral dimension to this problem. And crucially, he and President Sisi have categorically rejected any forced displacement of Palestinians, calling it rightly a violation of international law and a threat to regional security. President Sisi has positioned Egypt not only as a humanitarian corridor, but as a strategic broker, and his government's coordination with Jordan and France reflects a shift, a coalition of moderation and reconstruction, not escalation. And Sisi's blunt warning that without a just solution for the Palestinians, there will be no permanent stability in the Middle East is not just rhetoric, it's global realism. And Egypt, alongside Qatar and the United States, was instrumental in brokering January's now collapsed ceasefire. And a return to that negotiation table is not optional. It is the only viable route forward, whatever the hawks in Jerusalem are thinking. There is progress. A senior Hamas delegation is now in Cairo to discuss an American-backed Egypt-bridged proposal, a phased hostage release, an initial 40 to 7-day ceasefire, and a renewed humanitarian corridor with access, renewed access for humanitarian relief. And Hamas seeks guarantees from Israel. Israel remains cautious, but movement is visible. And families of hostages have urged a unified release, not a trickle, but a resolution. Their anguish is legitimate, but it should not be weaponized to prolong the war. Ceasefires must be tied to hostage release, not only for ethical reasons, but for the broader strategic aim of rebuilding any semblance of trust. Contrast this now with President Donald Trump's astonishing remarks in which he suggested the United Nations should own Gaza and relocate its inhabitants. This isn't just policy, it's provocation wrapped in property speculation. Years ago when I was at Oxford, there was a fellow called Andrew Sullivan. He's now he's now in America. He edited a thing called The New Republic. He was very instrumental in the Republican movement, but he seems to be equally exasperated as I am with Donald Trump. In fact, he's written some stuff saying as much, and people said, why don't you go back home? And he says, I am an American citizen, which he is. I think he's got every right to comment. Trump's so-called freedom zone proposal amounts to a de facto ethnic cleansing, and it's a grotesque echo of the Nakba and a diplomatic non-starter. It is madness. Madness. And the displacement of populations under duress violates every principle of the UN Charter and the Geneva Conventions, and it would inflame not only the Arab world, but fracture what little consensus remains in the West and set a precedent that will be very difficult to unravel. A ceasefire is not appeasement, it's the foundation of rational diplomacy if it's undertaken within the process of an eventual peace. With Macron, Sisi and King Abdullah of Jordan aligned, and with Hamas at least partially engaging with the Egyptian plan, the window is narrow but real. And this isn't just about rewarding Hamas. It isn't about rewarding Hamas at all. It's about getting Hamas out of the way. It's not absolving Israel of its security imperatives. It's about halting a humanitarian descent into utter wretchedness and opening a path to a form of life rooted in legality, not extremism, in diplomacy, not delusion, and in stability. To ignore this opportunity would be to endorse continued bloodshed, regional destabilization and moral failure on a global scale. The ceasefire must return, not later but now, and it must be as part of the path towards an eventual and a lasting peace. And Netanyahu must get on board with that, and Trump must be persuaded to persuade Netanyahu if no one else can. The meeting that Trump had in Washington, what was it for? Because it doesn't seem to have been for anything except a photo op. I don't really understand the present motives of Donald Trump, except they seem the activities of somebody who is quietly going mad on the world stage. It reminds me really, when I think of history, this is like having a front seat watching the end of Marius in his 8th consulship, mad and just raging at anything that happens to come near him.